Welcome, my friends, to another hot episode of Pop Culture Fridays. I'm your host, as always, Troy, here every Friday, talking to you about culture and pop culture, maybe a little more culture than pop culture and whatever. Beautiful spring day. It's sunny. You got to take advantage of these days in Michigan in the spring. I think it's going to come early. But, you got to get out in the sun and enjoy it. Thought, why not get a little vitamin D while I talk with my best buds? That's you. Come on down. This episode, I've got a good one for you. It's my favorite 3 podcast episodes out there right now. Different podcasts, different episodes, kind of well-rounded, got some lovey-dovey stuff, got some philosophy stuff, got some art stuff. I think you're going to like it. Don't worry about it. I've got links to them in the description. Don't click on it now. Hold on, buddy. Wait till you hear me talk about it. I'll give you a little taste. Then you can click on which one sounds more interesting. Maybe you hit them all 3. Maybe you hit none. But you're here now. So let me get through this. Just let me hold on here. All right. Let's get to it. 3 podcasts that I'm in love with right now out there. Number 3. Now, this podcast doesn't exist anymore. It's called The Nerdist, but it's Jeff Bridges on The Nerdist. It's about 6 years old. I've listened to it several times over the years. It's a great one. The Nerdist was hosted by Chris Hardwick. He had a podcast for a long time. And it's sort of he has that podcast still, but it's called ID10T. You can still find some of these on YouTube. All these are on YouTube, by the way. I don't know if I said that. This is just, you pull it up, it's just the audio, but it's great. Jeff Bridges, what a cool guy. He's got a lot of interesting insight into the world and life and relationships and connecting and purpose. Chris Hardwick is really good too. When he gets into the moment, he's very good at understanding there's a moment and then maybe expanding upon it or being in there and sort of pulling other threads out from it. Or he's a really good interviewer, or starting threads that get people sort of comfortably into a direction where you can start to really feel like you're getting a chunk of wisdom. I think that's why we all listen to podcasts anyway, right? You're hoping to have those moments where your eyes sort of open up, or you're connecting with something in a way that you can sort of start to understand what they're feeling, maybe even apply it to your own life. I mean, that's really what this is all about, right? I mean, we're interacting with things because we want to enjoy good things. We like being around good things, positive things that we can use in our own lives to improve them, or just to enjoy the moment. Hopefully it's enjoying the moment mostly. Great episode. It's about 48 minutes long. I think you're going to enjoy it. Give you a little taste here. Chris was asking Bridges about, what's it like to survive a long-term relationship. Not survive, but like continue it for so long. Because at the time, this is about 6 years ago, Jeff Bridges had been married for 37 plus years. So he's in the 43, 44 year range now. Chris was asking him, like, how do you make it work? And Jeff Bridges was giving some great insight about how, you have to kind of understand the other person as best you can, but know that you can't get it completely because it's their story. You're never going to see the world from their perspective entirely. You can only try to understand how they're describing it. So when people get into couples get into arguments and they say things like, you don't get it. Well, you don't, and you have to accept that and then maybe try to talk to each other. And in those moments when you have those trying times, he says that if you can get through that, those are actually pathways to opening the doors to a higher level of intimacy. Sounds pretty interesting. I don't know. He gave this really great example saying how when he first met his wife, he was on shooting a movie, and he saw his wife out of the corner of his eye and had been thinking about going up to her. Finally, he gets up the courage to go over there and says, hey, do you want to go out? And she says, that's okay, thanks. But maybe it's a small town, maybe I'll see you around. So eventually, obviously, they do see each other around, they hit it off, they click right away, get married, the whole thing. He said he had been thinking for a long time from that moment on, like, did I pick the right person? Am I on the right path or whatever? Cut to 10 years down the road of being married, and he gets a letter in the mail from, I guess, a photographer that was on the shoot there at that movie set. And he says, Jeff, I thought you might find this interesting. I was going through some of my old video files. I took a picture of you talking to this girl on set that I think is your wife. So he had captured the moment he had said his first words to his wife and then got it in the mail 10 years later. Pretty amazing story. And, just makes you think about how we connect with people and the meaning behind everything and how weird things like that happen. I don't know if it's coincidence or just weirdness or universal connectivity. All right, Jeff Bridges, the Nerdist. That's the first one. That's number 3. Let's get to number 2. Now, Joe Rogan Experience. Everybody has their own take on what Joe Rogan is. Let me tell you something. You really got to understand this show and his surroundings and his friends to really, I think, get a good idea. This sounds stupid to say, but get a good idea of what he's about. This podcast, I don't want to get too dramatic here, but this podcast, it went a long way to pulling me out of some really dark times, maybe like 6 or 7 years ago, maybe longer, because I felt like I was connecting with someone who was sort of poking my intellectual curiosity in a good way, making me think about things, pulling me out of my shell, making me feel like it's okay to question the things and to be, kind of a stoner who just thought about things. But if you do it in a nice way and you sort of think about the interactions you're having on a daily basis and the energy we create, I owe that to this podcast, the Joe Rogan Experience. And my favorite episodes were the ones, at least in the early days. Now I have a lot of favorites, but in the early days it was Duncan Trussell who came on. A couple of goofy, kooky kids out there, always getting stoned, always talking about pseudo-philosophical stuff, but trying to think about the world and what we are and what this is and, how we're here and where are we going and what do people think, how do people become who they are, what they are. Great episode. You could probably pick any Duncan Trussell episode, but I wanted to pick this one because it's number 666. And Duncan's he's dressed up like the Pope. It's all nutty. I have a feeling that they were on shrooms in this episode. Now, it's not the kind of podcast where they come on and go, hey, we're on shrooms, man. Let's get crazy. They just do it. You can kind of tell by looking at them that they're either on edibles. I think it's shrooms, though. And the reason I say that is because in later episodes, they might reference like, oh, Duncan and I did this podcast. We were on shrooms, and I didn't know I could hold it together, but I like it. It's kind of fun to put you on the edge. So I saw something later that referred to it where he mentioned that, or one of them did. So that's what I think's happening here. Great episode. Here's what I love about these guys. They're not just people who are sort of modern day philosophers thinking about the way the universe moves through us and how we're moving through the world and all that. But they're also people who have those D.T. Suzuki, Alan Watts, Terrence McKenna, John Cage type ability to think and question and bring up things you hadn't thought before, but they also have the ability to be funny, so funny. So in the context of talking about interactions, they're stand-up comedians. So they'll have like these moments where they'll slip in a joke in the context of whatever it is they're talking about, and it'll just have you rolling. It's one of my favorite episodes. One of my favorite times is when Joe Rogan and Duncan Trussell are together. They're so funny. They click so well. They're like, you can tell they look like best friends having a good time together. And as Duncan Trussell says in the episode, he says, the universe is expanding, so you just got to roll with it. And if you try to dig in your heels and fight that change, you're going to get ripped apart. So just let it go and be part of everything, because you're 13.8 billion years old. That's what we are. We're space dust. We're particles. 13.8 billion. We're all our own universe. We're all our own God. As Ram Dass said, we're all God and drag. So check this episode out. There's a link below. Joe Rogan Experience with Duncan Trussell. That's number 2. All right, number 1. You're going to like this one, I think, because it's about art, social media, very interesting. It's the Art Assignment, and it is, PBS Digital Studios produces it. Now, I don't know that it's technically a podcast, but it's got videos on YouTube, and they're usually about 10 minutes long, tons of episodes about different things. The one I'm sharing with you today is is Instagram changing art? And this is hosted by curator Sarah Green. She always does a great job. A lot of interesting questions here. One thing I like about this show, not a whole lot of answers. A lot of questions. I like questions. I like the questions more than the answers. They're more interesting, and I like this I don't know attitude because I feel like the more you know you don't know, if that makes sense. So this one is interesting. Instagram, how much is it changing art? It's a really interesting, about 11-minute look into specifically the Instagram platform and how it's shaping how artists create works and how they present works, and how galleries shape their PR around, the perception they're trying to give or the appeal they're trying to create for potential visitors. It used to be that, as they say in the show, that the Cleveland Art Museum, let's just say, they're marketing to Cleveland, maybe the greater Cleveland area, maybe Ohio. But now that you're online, you're kind of appealing to people in London, or trying to, or in Pittsburgh, or in Detroit, or wherever. So it changes. It's changed everything, obviously, but it changes the way that people are approaching, thinking about what they have, the exhibits they have. Specifically, she mentions that the question about, well, are there things on Instagram that do better than others? And she says absolutely, which I think she's right. Things that have square shapes, things that are bright, things that are visibly legible, what else is it? Things that are immersive, right? So it's interesting to think about the fact that people, artists in particular, might be presenting works or creating works, which is kind of I don't know if it's dangerous, but it's a weird direction to go down, because if you're creating things based off of how you think it will do on Instagram, now all of a sudden Instagram is being pulled into your process. So this whole thing just looks at these questions. There's a quote here I want to read to you from Andrea Crespo, who's an artist, and this person said, quote, "Reward systems in social media were influencing my decisions while art making. I would think about what people would think based off of likes and comments." Now, we're talking about a platform that has 500 million daily users, 500 million daily users. And if you get into the game of likes and comments and reinforcing things that you're presenting, it seems almost hard or difficult to think that it wouldn't have an effect on your process. But what about the things that don't do well on Instagram but are amazing in person, like an installation that looks great in person and you have a great experience, but it's not photogenic? So these are the questions that we have to ask. This is a great episode for that. I'm going to stop talking. I want you to get over there and watch the art assignment. Is Instagram changing art? It's a great little 11 minutes to spend. Check out some other episodes while you're there. Hopefully, if I give them a plug, maybe I'll tag them in this. I don't know if you can tag in YouTube, but I'm going to try. All right, that's what I got for you this week. My favorite 3 podcast episodes out there right now. Please, folks, go to ArtHouse43.com. You can make a donation to the show. This is actually a lot of camera time and rehearsals and extras and takes, and I've got assistants that you can't see running around. Maybe I don't really, but who cares? You don't know that. If you can donate to support the show, please do it at ArtHouse43.com and click on donate. You can follow us at Culture Fridays on Twitter, at Pop Culture Fridays on Instagram. I'm your host, Troy. This has been Pop Culture Fridays. I want you to have a great weekend. I'll see you next week.